Good morning, everybody. So prompt.
Good morning.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. Just getting a wee bit organized.
Yeah, me too. Allison, do you know if we're waiting for Kelly this morning or not?
Sorry, can you ask that just a little bit louder, please? There's something loud happening over here. My computer's turned all the way up.
Do you know if we're waiting for Kelly this morning?
I assume so, but I think we can go ahead and get started if you'd like.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have too much to address, so I think it's, I don't think we'll need too much input. One thing I want to flag is that the spot on the website where the agenda is supposed to be, the link itself doesn't exist. It just taunts you. It just says agenda, but there's no link at all. So the agenda is the same every time, so I don't think anyone was too confused, but that's just a fact I wanted to at least acknowledge for the world. So let us call to order the June 23rd meeting of the Evanston Referrals Committee. Councilmember Sufferton.
Here. Yeah, howdy. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Physically indicates that he is present. Councilmember Revelle.
Here.
Oh, should we record the meeting as well?
I think it's being recorded.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I heard that message when I was logging on.
Oh, great. Mayor Biss is here, so with 3 members present, we have a quorum and prepared to do our work. The first item on our agenda is public comment. Is there any member of the public seeking to give comment this morning? Seeing none, we move to the next item on our agenda, approval of the minutes of the June 9th meeting. Is there a motion on this matter?
I move approval of the June meeting minutes.
Second.
Councilmember Revelle moves approval of the June 9th meeting minutes. Councilmember Sufferton seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Revelle?
Aye.
I vote aye, and with 3 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion passes and the minutes are approved. This brings us to the bulk of our work, items for consideration. As I understand it, we have one new referral that was made recently by Councilmember Kelly regarding hazard pay for firefighters, and then we have some holdovers from our previous meeting that Allison can point us to. Let's handle the new one first. So this is a referral, as I indicated, from Councilmember Kelly to utilize ARPA funding as a kind of a hazard pay or compensation associated with some of the negotiations that occurred between the city and the firefighters when the pandemic messed everything up.
My reading of it didn't sound like it was necessarily the ARPA funds, but it was a very long explanation. But anyway.
That was my first read, and my second read was actually that she was proposing 2 different types of utilization of ARPA funds.
Okay.
One was for hazard pay and one was for revenue loss, I think. And I'm not sure that revenue loss totally makes sense, but we're above my pay grade here.
Okay.
You know, my first instinct was to send this to finance and budget, but then my second instinct was, well, I don't know, all the other ARPA requests have just gone to some substantive committee that deals with the underlying issue. And so I wonder if this should go to Administration of Public Works, but I don't know if you guys have strong feelings about this.
I was a bit confused about that as well. I don't know, Kelly, do you have a thought about where it should go?
Well, yeah, they're not really qualified for the ARPA hazard pay. Last we checked into that because of their salary range. So, I mean, I suppose this can go to APW, but I'm just not really sure what the request is, I guess. If it's hazard pay through ARPA, I'm fairly certain that most, if not all of them, would not qualify under the ARPA constraints.
So as I understood it, she was proposing that it be either hazard pay or revenue loss.
Then that should go to budget. That should go to budget and finance then.
Yeah, but I mean, just respectfully, I don't think this is at all what revenue loss is for, right? Revenue loss is to shore up the city budget that got messed up, not to add a new expenditure.
Correct. And it's a long explanation, but you can count other things as revenue loss if you wanted to use the general fund budget for this. Long story short, it seems to me a budgetary issue.
Well, the link to revenue loss, as I understand it, is that the firefighters agreed to adjust their compensation because we were faced with a huge revenue loss, and now we have an opportunity to make that up.
Right, but I've just given them back the 2.5%, half of what they forewent, and then the other 2.5% they'll get back at the end of the year.
Okay, okay.
Well, I don't, look, I'm totally comfortable sending this to APW or Finance and Budget. I guess if I were to say my preference, and I'm totally comfortable either way, my preference would probably be APW, but if either one is fine with me. And if someone wants to make a motion for either one, that's fine with me.
Well, given how many tons of things we've sent to Finance and Budget, maybe it would get dealt with faster at APW, right? Maybe.
But I don't know if getting it done faster respectfully is like the right goal here. I mean, this affects our budget and we have collective bargaining coming up. And I think this should be considered with our budget. So I'm going to strongly suggest to go to Budget and Finance, even though they've got a boatload of items. Mm-hmm. But obviously it's up to the committee what they'd like to do.
This is Councilmember Reed here on the phone. May I chime in?
I mean, it's not customary. I mean, I guess, is there a reason why?
Because I've spoken to the firefighters on this issue. I've got some clarity on what the matter is. It's fine. Have fun, do what you want.
I mean, I guess, look, I'm totally fine sending this to Finance and Budget. I guess, I think, you know, I think that they'll have whoever hears it will have the information to make a decision. And if they want to throw it in with the 23 budget negotiation or the budget discussion, that's fine. If they want to throw it in with the collective bargaining, that's fine. If they want to do it, that's fine. If they want to just vote it down, that's fine too. But I think the information will be there. I don't think this is a complicated issue to understand. So why don't we just go ahead and send this to Finance and Budget then?
Okay, I'm comfortable making the motion that we send it to Finance and Budget.
Second.
And what time frame do you want to recommend to them?
So which quarter are we in? January, March, April, May?
We are kind of coming on the end of the second quarter.
Right. Well, if it's going to affect the budget and or the collective bargaining that's underway, I suppose the sooner, you know, yeah,
they've got to hear it in the third quarter if there's a chance it affects the budget.
Right. So and have asked them to put it on the agenda before the end of the third quarter.
Okay, so Councilmember Revelle moves that we refer this to the Finance and Budget Committee with a recommendation that they hear it before the end of the third quarter of 2022. Councilmember Sufferton seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye. Councilmember
Revelle?
Aye.
I vote aye, and with the vote 3 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion passes and the item is duly referred. I think this brings us then to kind of holdover items that we didn't act on because we perhaps were seeking further information. And I think that's why Councilmember Reed is here, which is, I think, going to be very helpful. Allison, do you want to kind of walk us through what we have before us?
Yes, so we've got lines 23, 24, and 25 of the new referrals form. And I'd say the first two, 23 and 24, we last time said it was best to speak to staff. So I think we should take those one at a time. And then the third, line 25, with questions about just clarity of what the intent was, just based on confusion because of conversations. So,
all right, so let's just take them in order. So Councilmember Reed, so line 23 is the pavement of the alley adjacent to 311 Elmwood. And I think the sort of the view here was like, great, there's no need for that to be a referral. That can just kind of happen. Can you just say a word about what the situation is here and what the why you wanted this to go through the referrals process?
Yeah, it would create a new expenditure that was not budgeted for, and as a budget amendment, that is a policy change. The funding for it this is a CDBG alley, and so the funding would come from CDBG for next year. And I just wanted to make sure that this alley, which is directly adjacent to the new living room, would be paved, and we'd create an area that is safe and conducive for that.
So I think I'm just behind here. You said for next year, so that why would that not just be a part of the 2023 budget?
It could be for this year, whatever. It would be something different than what we are currently doing, and I want to make sure that it is in the budget.
Okay.
My understanding is that we've already designated how this year's CDBG funds are going to be used, with the infrastructure portion of the CDBG funds. And I've been part of approving these expenditures, but I'm not familiar with the process we use to decide which alleys in our CDBG areas are, how we decide which ones are the ones to pave next, because I think we probably have lots of alleys in those eligible areas that are eager to get paved. So I'm not sure why. I mean, I understand that there's special attention on this alley right now because of the adjacent living room, but I'm not sure why that should go to the head of the line.
Kelly?
Yes. So for alley requests, they go into a queue and they're done in order, and they're planned for yearly. So I'm not sure if this one's already on a list, but if it is, it could be somewhere in the queue. I would have to look and see where it would be on the list. And Public Works gets that information from the community members in that area. And then they collectively decide if they want the alley repaved.
So how does something get in the queue?
They contact Public Works.
Wait, so we pick the order that we pave alleys in based on the order that residents think to call Public Works?
Well, also based on the condition of the alley. So it's
well, right. That's
yeah.
So it's not as simple as just they go down the list in order.
I mean, I think it's different for the alleys that are paved through CDBG funds.
Yeah, it is different with CDBG alleys, and it's unlike a non-CDBG alley. There is a process. As the clerk, I used to sit on the local board of improvements, and so folks get a petition, and the neighbors cover half the cost of the pavement through either a direct payment or a lien, and so there's a whole process there. But with CDBG alleys, it is a different process, and I think creating a more formal process with CDBG would make sense. But right now, my understanding is just it's more of an ad hoc process where either a council member or, as Kelly said, community members raise an issue with the CDBG alley, and that's how it gets on on the list. And so this is me formalizing that process by making a referral for a CDBG alley, which I think is more appropriate.
So you'd be asking to have it put on the list for the CDBG list, but not.
If there is I don't think there is a CDBG list that's developed years out. That's not my understanding, based on conversations that I've had. But sure, we can say put it on the list, but if there is no list, it would be at the top of the non-existent list. So sure, we can say looking to put it on the list.
I guess I think the reason we're here, like having this follow-up conversation, is there's a process, maybe it's a bad process, that's ordinarily used, and doing this by referral is different than that. And
which is maybe an opportunity to understand the process and clarify it. And
now you're taking the words out of my mouth, but then we should, I just feel like if we're already in a situation where the process is poorly understood and not clear, then like throwing a new kind of wrinkle into it in the middle is going to make it less well understood and less clear. And like, I get why you as the council member from the 8th Ward want this particular alley to get put at the front of the line, but this doesn't seem to be a step in the right direction from the point of view of clarifying the way this gets done. And if we think that the way to do it in general should be through referral, which again, I'm pretty skeptical of just personally, then like, let's say that and send an email to council and be like, hey, new way to handle CDBG alley paving. If you want it done, don't just kind of informally call up Sarah, but do a referral and it'll go to APW through that. But if that's how this ought to be done, then we ought to make the decision to do it that way. And if that's not how it ought to be done, then we shouldn't act on this referral, is my view.
Well, we could ask the CDBG, the Housing and Community Development Committee, to address the issue of how alleys are chosen for the CDBG paving program. The most recent alleys, I think, have been in the area around the waste transfer station.
In the 5th Ward, yeah.
Right.
And 2nd Ward.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So I guess, so in my mind, the paving of alleys, the non-CDBG alley paving program is functioning fine. I mean, extremely slowly because there's not much money to put into it. So we only do 1 or 2 alleys a year, which is really frustrating for residents with terrible alleys. But so I'm not suggesting that we try to change that, because I think that process is working okay. But we could ask the Housing and Community Development Committee to clarify how the process works or should work for the CDBG alleys.
I mean, that's fine with me. It's fine to just get a memo from staff and read it and decide if we want to change things. I mean, I'm cool with anything. I'm not dogmatic about this. I just think my instinct is that we don't want the prioritization of alley paving to go through this committee. I think that's sort of not why we're here.
I agree. Yeah.
And I take Councilmember Reed's point that the process might be confusing, and I also take his point that it's important for the 8th Ward for that alley to get paved, and I hope that will get the appropriate consideration. But I just feel like this is kind of beyond the scope of what we're.
If I may ask, I would recommend or ask that this be sent to, as Councilmember Revelle just mentioned, the HCDC committee. I'm sorry, as that committee is in their charter, if you will, in their purpose, they are set up specifically to deal with the allocation of CDBG funds. And so just like we have a very clear, the whole point of the referrals process was to create a clear, transparent process for city actions. And the city council is responsible for authorizing all funds. So it just makes sense that there is a clear legislative process. And the way we pave alleys through the current transparent process with the Board of Local Improvements is a first come, first serve. It's really no different than a referral, other than the folks making the referral essentially are residents. And so who is better positioned to understand which alleys are more problematic in their ward and which alleys should be prioritized if, any unpaved alley is in a pretty similar condition, which is not great, than the elected representative of that ward. And so I don't think that working through a referral process and maybe even tweaking that process to try to prioritize maybe the most damaged alleys is a bad idea. But I still think that going through a clear, transparent process, particularly going through HCDC, which is already charged with CDBG funds, makes sense.
Kelly?
So I just got off the phone with Dave Stoneback, and he said for CDBG areas, the city rotates between the wards. And then for when they get to a particular ward, they call the council member of that ward and say, this is the alley we're scheduled to repave. Do you think that's the alley that has the most need? Yes or no? And they kind of defer to the council member based on the complaints the council member's been getting from the area ward. So it's a rotation system that's in place already.
And 8th Ward is up next.
I don't know that to be the case, but I will trust that you're right.
I understand that to be the case from conversations with Sarah and Bobby and Councilmember Burns. 5th Ward is 6th.
So it sounds like we have a process then.
It sounds both like we have a process and that it's going to produce the outcome that Councilmember is looking for. I mean, if we
but I'm just looking to make it more transparent so there's an actual, referral and consistent with what we're doing now. And so I'm just making the referral consistent with that process.
I mean, I guess I would be, if we want to act on this, I would be most supportive of referring to the HCDC. I did it, I think. The question of assessing this process and seeing if they want to recommend a different one. My instinct, and I think Councilmember Reed's making a pretty good point that it's not obvious that just sort of a rotation and a behind the scenes phone call is the fairest and most transparent way to handle that. And so I'm really open to the idea that maybe a different process would be better. My instinct is that the Referrals Committee is not the right venue for that process. And so rather than set a precedent of referring this one out and the next time somebody wants an alley paved, they'll come to the Referrals Committee and say, yeah, but you referred to Vaughn's alley. I would propose that we refer to them, request that they evaluate this process and consider whether they want to recommend a different one.
The Housing and CD Committee.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, given that I'm on that committee and I had no idea that that was the quote process, it does sound like the committee itself should at least be more aware of why a particular alley is on the list in a given year. So,
and I mean, like we're not Chicago, right? Like we don't have to just mechanically rotate by ward because every council member is, a lord of a fiefdom. Like we can make.
Yeah, I mean, are there more alleys that need paving in one ward compared to another ward, for example? But
probably.
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
That are also in CDBG areas, which is a key. Yes, a key distinction. Which the 5th Ward and 8th Ward are we are the CDBG areas primarily of the city.
Right, yeah. Well, so I know, Daniel, you don't want this to have all this alley stuff come to referrals, but how about forwarding this item to HCDC just to encourage the committee to discuss the process that's used and see whether any adjustments are needed. But this wouldn't necessarily result in any kind of a ordinance change or anything. It could just, but certainly be clear, would help clarify for council members and the public both.
I think that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a, oh, sorry, Allison?
I just would recommend either like making a new referral or making a very clear amendment to this one, just so that it's clear
it's not specific to this alley. It's more a general.
It's about the process.
Yeah,
Right.
I would recommend making a specific motion, and I've already got I've sort of typed up, I've memorialized it in the way that I'm going to type up the let's see, column Q of the spreadsheet.
So how have you worded that?
What I've said is housing and community development with requests that they discuss the process used for this category of decision rather than analyze the specific request.
Okay. I so move.
Do you have a timeline?
During the third quarter.
Right. Yeah, fun. Okay. Sounds good. Second.
All right. So Councilmember Revelle moves that this be referred to the Housing and Community Development Committee with the request that they discuss the process used for this category of decision rather than analyze the specific request, with the recommendation that occur in the third quarter of 2022. Councilmember Sufferton seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Revelle.
Aye.
I vote aye, and with three, that's it. I can count all the way to three. You're welcome, everybody. With 3 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion passes and the item is duly referred. This brings us to line 24, which is about prohibition of trucks on certain streets in the 8th Ward. So Councilmember Reed, what was it's kind of like at a high level the same kind of category. Seems like a
no. This one's a very different category because this actually is a code revision. So within our code is a section, and I think I included a memo for this, or maybe that was the next one. Maybe I didn't. But within our code, no, I did include a memo for this one. So within our code, there's a section that prohibits trucks on certain streets, and there are certain streets in Evanston that already have trucks prohibited, and I'm just looking to amend that ordinance to include the specified streets in the memo in the 8th Ward. And so literally the way the memo is written, that's exactly how the code is drafted. So you plug that language directly into the code.
Got it. And how has this bit of the code ordinarily evolved over time? Because I presume these truck prohibitions, I mean, it's got to be the case that they change from time to time.
I have not seen that. It seems as though once these streets are trucks prohibited, it would take another amendment to the code to change that.
Got it. I see. Okay. Well, I don't know.
So is that an ANPW?
Yeah.
APW.
Yeah, I would think it is. I don't know. Kelly, do you have any input just about how these have been handled in the past?
I think they've got an APW.
Okay, I mean, to be totally honest, I'm pretty persuaded by this. I mean, if it seems. And
there is another heavy truck issue that ANPW is wrestling with, the trucks getting to Evanston Lumber on Custer.
Yes.
So I don't know if those two need to go hand in hand but.
No, they're separate. This is a completely separate area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I'm pretty persuaded by this explanation. I'm comfortable just referring it if
okay. So I move that we forward this item to ANPW and ask them to work on it in the third quarter.
Second.
So Councilmember Revelle moves that this be referred to the Administration Public Works Committee with the recommendation to hear it during the third quarter of 2022. Councilmember Sufferton seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Revelle.
Aye.
And I vote aye. 3 voting in favor and none voting against. The motion carries and the item is referred. And this brings us to item line 25, which is the issue with July 4th Parkway regulations, which we held because, and this may have been a consequence of a game of telephone, but it sounded like there were a couple options that had been discussed in conversation between Councilmember Reed and Allison that struck us as really, really different in terms of how controversial or difficult they would be. And so we didn't want to refer it until we had more clarity about what direction was intended here, because we thought we could do a better job of recommending a sensible time frame if we had some understanding. And as I recall, so let me actually turn over to Allison first, who just to kind of refresh us on where we left the situation 2 weeks ago.
Yes. So the ordinance, or the proposed ordinance in the referral, strikes it and gets rid of it completely. The conversation I had with Councilmember Reed, I sort of understood that the goal was to sort of equalize things in terms of any other parades as well. And so I thought maybe if we sort of expanded it to the type of parade, so maybe instead of getting rid of it, it was like it applied to any parade that, you know, had a license through the city. Those are two very different things, and so we just wanted clarification about which direction Councilmember Reed wanted to go.
Great, thank you. And just by it's the specific kind of regulations that exist around what happens in the parkway leading up to July 4th.
Yeah, our ordinance is very specific about the 4th of July parade. Right. And so you could see expanding it if there's a need for any other parades, or yeah.
Got it. So Councilmember Reed, do you want to jump in and say more?
Yeah.
About your concern here?
Yeah, my concern here, one, I want to clarify to the committee, because looking back at it, it could be my email response to the last email could be seen as snippy, but when I said respectfully, I quite literally meant respectfully. To be clear, it wasn't like a passive aggressive respectfully. But anyhow, my thing here is my only goal is that this law, as written on the books, does not comport with the Constitution and would be found at facial value unconstitutional, because you can't. It's not content neutral. You can't say that you can do this activity for the 4th of July, but not do the same activity for the Juneteenth parade or for some other parade, even a parade that would be offensive. And we know locally that even offensive parades, as we've seen in Skokie, are allowed to occur here. And so if we have a provision that says that you can set up in the parkway for the 4th of July parade, we have to either allow folks to set up in the parkway for any parade or for no parade.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we understood Allison to be explaining to us at our last meeting.
And so my referral is to I just, because I took the time to actually often draft the ordinances that I'm seeking to introduce. I just struck it, and I'm perfectly happy during the legislative process for someone to devise some other scheme that can address all parades. That just wasn't my goal. And just as we saw with Councilmember Suffredin's truck referral, we just let the legislative process, the referral is made, and folks can amend and change and do whatever the heck, the council wants to do with it before it either passes or fails. And so,
yeah, I would use that as an example of like excellent legislative process, though.
I think we learned.
What's our parade schedule? What's our parade schedule? That'll help figure out the appropriate timeline. Obviously, we're not going to hit this before the 4th of July. Juneteenth parade has happened. Are there other parades that this would apply to that are on the books right now?
Well, eventually the Juneteenth parade might, residents might want to set up in advance.
Oh no, what I'm saying, I'm sorry. What I'm saying is we don't have a parade upcoming after the 4th of July parade. So in terms of figuring out
Right.
timing of this, we have some time to.
Right.
Well, we could. I mean, anyone could request to have a parade at any time, essentially, for any purpose.
Right, but it only becomes a problem when the parade is so popular that people start wanting to put their chairs out days in advance.
No, not as it's written.
This is not sort of germane, but I just can't help but ask because we've got a couple lawyers in this call. Why is it unconstitutional to have different regulations for the July 4th parade?
It's not, it's only unconstitutional if you restrict the form of speech for one type of event over another. So it has to be content neutral.
And this one is not content neutral, as it specifies the 4th of July parade over a parade maybe that denounced America or did not celebrate America, or over, for example, the Juneteenth parade, which makes it not content neutral. Just like burning a flag is, you can burn a flag and that's been found. Texas made a law a while ago that said you can't burn flags. That was found unconstitutional because it was not a content neutral. But if they said that you can't burn a flag in public, or you can't burn anything in public, perfectly fine. But when you specifically say you can't burn a flag in an offensive manner, that makes it facially unconstitutional. Similar here.
Have you talked to the law department or any outside legal groups about your interpretation?
That's a part of the legislative process.
Okay, but
yeah, I mean,
what's the time? I guess I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. What I want to understand is, in terms of the ideal legislative process would be bringing a finished product for a vote. So what is the timeline in terms of parades that are known to be upcoming, in terms of figuring out how much time we can spend on the front end to make sure whatever we bring to council is as close to a completed product as possible? I
mean, I think, to be completely honest, 11 months, right? Like, really, Juneteenth is our other kind of annual parade tradition. I mean, look, I think we should just refer this. I mean, I don't think this is the appropriate place for us to argue about the legal issue. I have instincts and no law degree, and I'll keep my mouth shut for that reason. But I think we should refer this, and I think, to Councilmember Suffernan's point, it's not, I don't think there's a real emergency here, because, there's no anticipated parades until next year. But let's refer it to the appropriate place and let them talk it over and make a judgment. And they've got time to do it right and ask the right questions and get input from the law department and anybody else they need input from.
So what is the right committee?
Councilman Reed requested Human Services. That seems as good as any to me. I mean, I guess it would have to be Human Services or APW. I don't.
Yeah, well, let's say Human Services.
Great.
Okay, so I move that we forward this item to Human Services and ask them to address it by the end of the first quarter of 2023.
Second.
Councilmember Revelle moves this item be referred to the Human Services Committee with the request that it be heard, with the recommendation, that it be heard before the end of the first quarter of 2023. Councilmember Suffernan seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Councilmember Suffernan?
Aye.
Councilmember Revelle?
Aye.
I vote aye, and with 3 voting in favor and none voting against, this item also passes and is duly referred.
May I make one request, Chair, and then I'll drop off? There are a number of items, referrals of mine that have been referred to Finance and Budget, and Finance and Budget appears not to really at this point be focusing on any actual referrals. And just as was mentioned earlier with Councilmember Kelly's referral, it seems that, you know, a number of those referrals that I made that have budget impacts, and I made these last summer around this time, may be better suited just going through the appropriate committee, such as APW, whatever, just as any other referral that has budget implications does. Finance and budget doesn't really seem to be focusing on these kinds of issues.
I think that's a fair point. So what I would suggest is that we have a conversation with the new chair of the Finance and Budget Committee and a look over those referrals between now and our next meeting, with the idea that if they need to be re-referred elsewhere, we can be prepared to do that in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, thanks everybody for their time and attention, and thanks Councilmember Reed for being here to help us better understand these items. And so, seeing nothing further to come before us, the June 23rd meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee stands adjourned.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Or the Referrals Committee, not the Budget and Finance Committee.
Dude,
Whatever. Okay.
Either way.
Get yourself a new mayor, guys. Get yourself a new mayor. I apologize. Thanks for that, Kelly.